We're in a period of dramatic change across our city, across our state. We have been here as a society before from time to time. Think of the era of the Macquaries, the influx of the gold rush in the 1850s, the huge boom of the 1880s, the optimism and growth post-Federation with its major infrastructure investment. The 1920s, of course, the post-World War II boom, culminating in the rapacious 1960s and 70s, when there was so much loss of heritage, spurring the green bans and community resistance. And a special hello to Jack Mundy here in the audience. When I was just out of university, we went to see Jack when he was a city councillor about starting the anti-monorail group. We lost the battle but won the war. And I didn't think that I'd be myself a city councillor much the same age when I met Jack. So just on a personal note. Aldo Rossi, the Italian author and architect, noted that he said, of course, there are certain epochs or periods in a city in which a city is transformed especially quickly, when the changes are impulsive and apparently unchecked. Certain catastrophic phenomena such as wars or expropriations can overturn seemingly stable urban situations very rapidly. In all cases, forces come into play and are applied to the city, and these forces may be of an economic, political or other nature. For us in Sydney today, without war, without fire, or without flood or pestilence, this recent period has been perhaps the most voracious of booms in our city's history. It's been self-inflicted, and as verification of these, I'd cite the following examples, and I'm sure you can all add to this list and amplify it. I would start with the sale of the Bridge Street sandstones, the Department of Lands and Educations, who have sat on their sites in public ownership continuously since 1788, if not before. In Millers Point, we had the great public housing, the first public housing built in Australia, proudly built and held in trust by successive New South Wales governments over a century. Through wars, booms and depressions, unique, fragile community dispossessed. The sell-off of public land, of post offices, of some schools, of landmarks such as the stately Drummoyne Water Tower, the lease of key institutions such as the New South Wales Land and Property Information. Changes to Crown lands, remember that it only covers half the area of New South Wales. The scale of demolitions for the metro across the city, including some heritage-listed buildings. The destruction wreaked by WestConnex at Haberfield, at Concord, at Sydney Park, at St Peters, and the knock-on effects elsewhere across our city. And the atrocities along Anzac Parade, one of our very few grand commemorative boulevards. Not only the cutting down of so many of the historic Moreton Bay figs, but the needless footbridges, the cut of transport trenches, the defacement by the RMS for its so-called multi-flow intersection at Allison Road. Not to forget the federal government's fire sale of the GPO, the most important 19th century public building in Sydney, in fact the most important building in Sydney, sold off for a song without consultation or even a tender. More generally, public Sydney risks becoming privatised Sydney. We know that regardless of political persuasion, privatisation is deeply unpopular with the majority of citizens and constitutes a theft of public assets that would otherwise be held in trust for future generations. In balancing the ledger of public Sydney, and you may know that this is a deep interest of mine, the City of Sydney has had to buy 2 heritage properties, in fact buy back Customs House and the former Redfern Post Office, which we're very proud of our actions there. It is also worth noting, as the Minister rightly did note, thank you, that there have been some major additions, especially the sublime new spaces at the Anzac Memorial, the realised and planned expansion at the Australian Museum, the skillful improvements at the State Library. Similarly, the funding of the Sydney Olympic Museum's ambitious project at Hyde Park Barracks, which has been enabled by cooperation between the city and state institutions with the extension of the heritage floor space scheme to public buildings. And that is entirely funding the $20 million of that project. It might be worth adding that the jury's still out on the Art Gallery of New South Wales Sydney Modern project, but I'm sure that there's plenty of opinions around the room on that one. In the reorganisation, Minister, within the New South Wales government, there are a number of important roles and responsibilities at play, seemingly orphans of bureaucratic reshuffling. Where to for the New South Wales government architect the position is still vacant. The venerable office that has been done so much for the state across 200 years, where does it sit now? Its heritage division has been, where do they sit? They've been dissociated from the government architect's position themselves. And where does the Minister's stonework program sit? Hopefully it sits with you, Minister, and you can bring that fantastic initiative forward. And also, of course, the Office of Environment and Heritage. So I think people at this table might know where it's sitting this week, but it'd be good if everyone else knew as well, and that we had full confidence in these great institutions which have served the state so well. And one of the things, being a councillor, I've actually been at many events where Minister Harwin, in his capacity as Minister of the Arts, has spoken incredibly enthusiastically. I know that you have an advocate here as a minister, and I look forward to his embrace and custodianship of heritage. Which of course brings us to Parramatta and the moving of the Powerhouse Museum. And I'm hoping that the Minister might bring some perspectives on that. But it's not just, of course, the Powerhouse and the threats to Willow Grove and St George's Terraces by the new Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences. It's not just a use and transformation plan for the sensitive female factory in the former Cumberland Hospital site, which the Minister mentioned. It's not only the cavalier demolition of the Parramatta Memorial Pool and the intrusion into Parramatta Park by the new stadium, the Leagues Club and the hotel. And if only the alignment of the light rail line in both the Cumberland Hospital and Rose Hill was not so poorly considered, all of these things surely can be addressed. Further afield across Western Sydney from Wollondilly to Windsor, there are many threats and issues to the rural heritage and environmental character due to ongoing sprawl. The intent to needlessly raise the wall of Warragamba Dam would both intrude on the ecology of the Blue Mountains and open vast swathes of the plans of Western Sydney to additional development. Surely this is a decision that needs to be rethought. But it is not just a question of loss, there is also the issue of the quality of work we are building today, of our future heritage. We see the wanton demolition and replacement with, like at Darling Harbour, the exhibition buildings in particular, the needlessly repeated at the Sydney Football Stadium and only just averted at the Olympic Stadium. Does this signal the era of disposable public buildings, built on the cheap to be knocked down every 30 years or so, a throwaway city of junk buildings? Is this the best we can do? As if public buildings were being thrown up not as meaningful representations of public life and civic ambition, but primarily as vehicles for staging private profiteering, which is absolutely what the stadium is. Close to here too, Sirius has been widely praised as an exemplar of social and architectural heritage. Like Windsor's Thompson Square, it has given rise to a great public campaign to retain it. I know they're both in the awards today. But thinking of Sirius, it's also time to look more broadly at modern heritage, as so much is under threat. The imminent demolition of Badura in Glebe, and if you've seen the report in the paper today about the disappointing court case of Robb College by Michael Dysart at the University of New England, amongst others. And just to give you pause, think of the recent fight to save Federation Square in Melbourne. It shows that recent public buildings can have deep resonance with the public in terms of their value and the confidence they instill about the qualities of the cities that we may want. I'm happy to report that the City of Sydney has recently undertaken a comprehensive heritage review of buildings built in the city centre up to 1975. It'd be better to go even further. In fact, we snuck in Town Hall House, which was finished in 1978, and we added 9 new listings to the LEP. Wouldn't it be good to extend this to the whole LGA, which I'm certainly pushing for? Wouldn't it be even better to extend such consideration across the state? And that might be a great legacy for this minister to take up. Wouldn't it also be good or opportune to update Section 170 registers of public assets to recognise these more recent public works? And that's an essential, particularly before any disposal of public works. While we're at it, it'd be an opportune time to investigate promoting perhaps more local listings to state listings, and maybe I'm addressing the Heritage Council here, more state to national listings, and indeed to search out more potential World Heritage listings. Heritage makes us concentrate on things of enduring value and on our role as custodians for the future. The outstanding Spanish architect, teacher and critic Rafael Moneo considers that, I like to see the city as a building on which we are all working, but one which we will never see completed. One cannot think of any figure that is completely closed, of any city that has attained its plenitude. So it is encouraging to consider the current day frontiers of heritage. First of all, the appropriate recognition of Indigenous heritage, that's a must. The listing of heritage spaces, elements, fountains, memorials, including streets and subdivisions, are structural elements beyond just the visual elements. The issue of appropriate curtilage around items, I'm sure this will come up in the awards today, and the relationship between old and new, landscape heritage. And also to interrogate this past and current orthodoxies, I think both a little bit overstated regarding the distinction or not between old and new. And to rethink adaptive reuse as creative adaptation. What's encouraging is to ally heritage with design thinking, to engage the community in this discussion, to inform the community. In his major work with historic buildings, particularly in Berlin, the celebrated British architect David Chipperfield observed, this concern has led us to create a new building from the remains of the old, a new building that neither celebrates nor hides its history, but includes it, where each decision, whether about repair, completion or addition, was grounded by the articulation of its physical quality and its meaning, where all parts of the building attempt to inflict to a singular idea, an idea not of what is lost, but of what is saved. These are some of the issues that are covered in these National Trust Awards now in their 25th year. The awards constitute a celebration of much that we are doing well as a society. When we look across the meta categories, we see so much fine work. I know from my own personal experience how satisfying the recognition of such awards from your peers is. The recognition of all the work and time you've put in. And when you look around how many people in the room, it's just an extraordinary quantity. Drawing on your research and your knowledge, growing your own experience, often led by your own fascination with the place, its people and its stories. In many cases, you have added a chapter to these stories. And that's what we're celebrating today. For heritage is one of the few endeavours where we actually respect the quality of places or artefacts for our society. To me, this is both a positive and a challenge because we have a planning system which is really a development system. It hardly considers the qualities of our cities and places. It fails to notice that our public places are the foundations of our urban settlements. Really what we need is a reorientation of our city-making activities towards embodying the public interest, embodying durable qualities, genuine, sustainable, long-term thinking. We should only consider demolition to be acceptable when the replacement can be demonstrably shown to be better than what is lost, that it's an improvement. So far, heritage is the only mechanism available that recognises to any extent such thinking about qualities, about urban qualities. Certainly there are things like CEP 65 and recent changes to the LEP, the New South Wales Government Architects Better Placed document, which are positives, but so much of the planning is actually cast in the negative. We need to think about the quality of our built environment and put that front and centre in our city making. It's perhaps fitting to conclude with one of the great heritage challenges of this year, of any year, the catastrophic fire at Notre Dame in Paris. It's by no means isolated in being a heritage catastrophe. If you look around the world, there are many others that get perhaps less press. France now looks at how and what to rebuild. Writing in 1831, when the cathedral last sustained major damage and neglect following the French Revolution, before the emblematic restoration by Viollet-le-Duc, who constructed the flesh that just perished in the fire, the novelist Victor Hugo wrote in Notre Dame de Paris, he wrote, "Great edifices, like the mountains, are the work of centuries. Often architecture is transformed while they are still under construction, pendant opera interrupta. The new architecture takes the monument as it finds it, assimilates it to itself, is encrusted on it, develops it as it wants, and, if possible, finishes it. This is achieved without fuss or strain or reaction, in accordance with the tranquil laws of nature. The graft occurs, the saps circulate, the vegetation recovers. The individual and the artist are erased from these great piles which bear no author's name. They are the summary and summation of human intelligence. Time is the architect, the nation the builder. Thank you very much.